Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our culture transformation session. Certainly, what a great session to follow with April Lewis. Appreciate all the engagement with that discussion. My name is Gerard Jolly. I am the Director of Career Advancement Strategies with NAC. And we're excited to bring you this session on Johnson Health Center's culture transformation. Most, if not all of us, would like to work for an employer that highly values its employees and that demonstrate that in the actions that they take as an employer. We want to work for an employee that we choose to work for, even when other opportunities exist. That is an employer of choice. And Johnson Health Center has achieved that designation officially. How did they do it? What's been involved in that? Well, today we have with us the CEO of Johnson Health Center, Gary Campbell, who will introduce momentarily. We'll tell you a little bit about Gary as we have him here with us to share with us what culture transformation took place through building a coaching culture at Johnson Health Center. Gary is the founder and owner of Impact to Lead and also the CEO of Johnson Health Center in Lynchburg, Virginia. He's been in that role since 2014, and he's driven on creating an environment that'll bring joy and fulfillment to employees. Johnson Health Center became the first ever FQHC to achieve the Employer of Choice recognition in 2016. And in 2017, the center was named a great place to work. In 2018, a top 10 emerging small business in Central Virginia. And in 2019, the health center saw a record number of patients, and by 2020 had become a provider of choice as nominated in a community survey. They have been extraordinary. And so we're happy to hear from Gary and to hear what they've done to achieve this culture transformation to build a coaching culture. With that said, let's give our attention to Gary Campbell.
Gerard, thank you so very much. Good to be here. And I mean, I get excited when I hear these kind of things, and it just reminds me of how important the topics that there really is taking place in this summit, how relevant and timely they are for today, because things are a little different than they were probably 4 and 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, coming out of COVID and all of the things that we saw. So lots of things are happening. And I did want to say that I know that I have really a tall order here following up April Lewis, because April, I know she is high energy and high impact. So I know I've got to really amp the game up here when we talk about the culture and everything that we are working on. So it's good to be here. I want to thank you all, and we're going to crank right into it. I'm going to try to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions, and hopefully we will be able to do that. So next slide, please. This is me. I'm not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time there. We did, and this was not in the bio, but in 2022, we were named a best place to work again. So this is just some of the things that we want to continue to really talk through and add, and really why it's so important, because at the very bottom of this bio is clear on my why. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the why and the purpose, because all of these things are tied into your coaching culture. And when you think about coaching culture, you're really just talking about how to build better relationships with the people you do life with each and every day. So next slide, please.
All
All right.
Okay.
I hear.
Gary, you are muted.
I don't know what happened. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I was muted and then I was talking and went away. So let's go to the next slide, please, and talk about the opportunity landscape. I used to call this the challenging landscape, and I've switched it to opportunity landscape because we really have to always look at the things in front of us to determine how we're going to respond. And I've always looked at health centers as a way to say, okay, we have a captive audience. We have a captive audience in the patients that we serve. We have a mission and a movement as to why we serve. So really kind of wrapping all this up together and making sure we put ourselves in a position to always stay ahead of what we see out there. And in the top bullet there, we see the competition heating up with everything you read about: CVS, Signify, Amazon, all sorts of other organizations are getting into this. Mark Cuban has filled over 1 million prescriptions with his pharmacy. And I saw this a few weeks back where Walmart announces growth of new health centers, and they're going to add at least 28 new health centers in 4 states for a total of at least 75 Walmart health centers offering primary health care by the end of next year. So think about that just for a minute. So we talk about there's plenty of patients to go around, but think about the competition for the staff, because we know there is a workforce crisis right now. Everybody's dealing with that, the shortages, and you see that in the third bullet. But there's a lot of things that add up into the compilation of what makes this so challenging for us. And when you look at coming out of COVID, I don't think that I even estimated it properly. I was thinking we were very prepared, kind of knew what we were going into, but even coming out, underestimated the impact that this thing would have. And we're seeing it with the workforce, especially the younger workforce. So Gen Z is expecting more from the leaders, and they want to focus on racial equity and cultural competence within the healthcare system. This is what they are looking for on a larger, broader space. So this is, again, we're seeing a change in that. We've always wanted to see equity and cultural competence, but I think we're seeing it, and it's getting more traction because of our younger workers, and they're bringing this passion into the workplace. Inflation and labor shortage are continuing to strain health centers. They strain our health center, and it really is something that we deal with each and every day. The labor and cost to do business is exceeding reimbursement rates in some service lines. It really is. One of the things, I was on a call this morning with my own CFO, looking over our budget for the next year, and we're looking at, there are certain areas where the cost of doing business is exceeding what we're getting paid for some of these things. It really is. These things have to be adjusted along the way, but that's the only way we're going to be able to keep up. Per a NAC survey that came out, I think back in February, the February, these were some startling numbers. 68% of health centers report losing up to 25% of their workforce, while 15% report losing up to 50% over a 6-month period, and nurses are ranking the highest. And we're seeing a very similar track record at our own health center. We struggle for the nurse population, looking at a lot of creative ways to keep people, and even our turnover rates have become higher than we are accustomed to. They're well below the national average, but they're still they're giving us challenges just like everyone else. And then, of course, if you read Gallup and you talk about employee engagement, it's dropped to 32%, with a 6-drop loss in highly satisfied workers. That's concerning, because think about your highly satisfied worker category. Those are the folks that you think, these are stable, we're going to be able to depend on these people. These are the ones we give more work to, although we probably shouldn't do that. We tend to. We're seeing a 6-point drop in those as well. And then data shows that women reported higher disengagement and dissatisfaction than men. And a step further, the younger workforce, those under 35, the Gen Zs and the millennials, are showing a 4-point drop and a 4-point increase in higher disengagement. So again, we're seeing all of these things that are really colliding all at once to make for that perfect storm. So you look at health centers, and if you're going to be a successful health center, really a successful organization at any level, the focus has to be on a brand that emphasizes culture and values, and communicating more than just what they do, but why and how they do it. Next slide, please. So we'll talk about the employer choice, and I haven't really gone into the employer choice story in quite a while, but it is one that really it creates it renews my passion every time, because it's something that once you're there, the work just starts. You have to stay there, and you have to continue to do things that are bigger and better in order to maintain that level. But it comes down to culture and the impact of culture, because genuine culture is not created by mission statements, slogans, or policies, but it's by the quality of the actual person-to-person interaction. So if you're walking into a health center, if you're walking into any place of business, you go to the grocery store, you go to a restaurant, if you see how those employees or staff are interacting with each other, that tells you a little bit about the culture. And so when I walk around our health centers, or when I bring visitors or guests in, or they're walking around and no one knows who they are, and they can tell me that They sense a genuine degree of content by and large across our center. And that is a good feeling because you want that. And again, we all have, all of us have problems. We have issues as well. And not everybody is as happy as I would like them to be. But I think by and large, our culture speaks to the fact that it is one of engagement. And that is, again, it's the actual person-to-person interaction. We talk about the coaching culture, which we'll get to in a little bit. But this is part and parcel of what leads to that person-to-person interaction. A culture of excellence is an environment where people understand on a very immediate and practical level what value, productivity, and true worth are all about. And the focus is really on quality of relationships within the organization. So, I'll tell you a little bit about how we get there and kind of the steps for how do you improve and increase that quality of relationships. But that's really what the culture is about, is the quality of those relationships. And a genuine culture of excellence is present when you know your why and work to understand their why as well. 4 or 5 years ago, we had an executive retreat and we talked about the why. We were going through an expanded version of our values, which I'll speak to in a second as well, but we intended to spend about 10 minutes on our why. It was more of a cursory exercise. I didn't realize how critical and how impactful that conversation was going to be, but that 10-minute 2-bullet in the slide turned into a 4-hour half-day session. And coming out of that session, this was a Friday, and on that Monday, my director of IT showed up in my office, and he looked like he was puzzled. He looked like he just had been up. He just had been thinking a lot. And so I stopped what I was doing and pulled over and said, pulled over up to the table and said, asked what was going on. And his comment was he just couldn't find his why. And he was having a difficult time with that. And this was a very talented individual. And we just recently had him speak at one of my local Lynchburg, Virginia impact leadership events. And he told his story and his why. And we hadn't talked to each other in over 3 years. So I hadn't seen him. And I can tell you, at the end of our conversation that day 5 years ago, I did ask him to take some time and help work through some of this to make sure he was positive of it. But within 6 months, he offered his resignation and he moved on into other things that helped him identify what his purpose was in life and what his purpose was as it relates to a career. And he's very successful now. He's always been successful. But what he did with us was he helped us really hone in on making sure we got to the heart of people's why. And when you get to the heart of people's why, that's coaching, that is engagement, and that shows people that you have an interest in them. And so when you start to do that, that is what breeds a positive, engaged culture. And the sad part is most organizations don't figure out the culture until things have gone wrong. And once that train has gotten off the tracks of your culture, there's a lot of effort that has to take place to getting that back. And you can't build a culture over the course of a week or a month, and you can't speak it into action. So that's why I wanted to put the impact of culture in front of you so you would have this as we go into the rest of our presentation. Next slide, please. So the Johnson Health Center, talk a little bit about our journey. And I always like to start, she said it, Joyce Joya and Roger Herman wrote the official Employer of Choice book back in 2000. And all of the offshoots of best places to work, great places to work, the things that you see that really are all over the place now, it really came off of that work that those two did. Joyce Joya is still doing this work. And we engaged her back at the end of 2014 to pursue the Employer of Choice path. And the reason we did it was because of the culture and because we wanted to see what our employees felt about our leadership. So a lot of the other surveys we had reviewed at the time really were all around, how management was, how management was perceived, how the supervisors. It wasn't as much on leadership, and I really wanted to lead people into a path versus pushing them. So this was one of the things we decided to target, and we did it. We were successful with it. It took us a little over 20 months. But Joyce Joya in a newspaper article was quoted as saying it was the best culture that we ever looked at. They scored the highest on our survey in terms of some of the questions that we asked. And the Johnson Health Center probably has a better culture than most, and most, if not all of them, have more resources than the Johnson Health Center, according to Joya. And this came out back in 2016. So next slide, please. And when I think about what, I looked at all of those companies and all those healthcare organizations that they had done the employer choice work for, and we felt very, very proud of that achievement back then. And so it all started with a vision, because you have to have a vision. And I always encourage people, if you don't have if you're not following a company vision, or if you don't have your personal vision, it's difficult to follow the organization vision. You should have a vision on what you would like to see done in your own world personally. And then if you're working for an organization, what is the health center's vision? What is the vision for the next strategic planning period? There's all sorts of visions that play into getting from point A to point B. And in August of 2014, we were dealing with a lot of the same things we're dealing with now. It seems, kind of overarching, but recruitment and retention issues was really bad back at the time when I took over as the interim CEO. And we really had no employee engagement. It was very limited. We had very little community engagement. We're just very siloed off. And having grown up in this community, I'd moved and then come back. That was disheartening to me to see that. We had credibility issues. There were, I joke and tell people that I used to walk into the grocery store and put my badge in my pocket, because I didn't want to, it wasn't at the time a place that I really felt my values were aligned with the direction we were in and going. And that's not to say that, I will never talk about how, one leadership philosophy is versus another, but there were differences. And, there was across the board, there was a lack of trust in leadership. And I was part of leadership. At the time, I was the chief operations officer, and I felt a burden with that. So, really was on me with building those relationships up until the 2014, when I had the opportunity to take over as the interim, and then really just made some statements right out of the gate. And I remember standing up in front of our employee base back then and said, our employees would be first. We would have an engaged culture. They would be number one. And I remember someone in the very back of the room saying, what about patients? And I didn't even have to answer that question, because on the other side of the room, somebody responded and said, if we take care of the patient, if we are taken care of, the patients will be taken care of. And that was really the right response for that. And that was the starting of the build of an engaged culture. So we did that. We focused on, wowing our customers which were our patients. We rebranded ourselves in the community, and we did a lot of foot soldier work, and we would build trust and leadership at all levels. That was the plan. That's why it was going to take a while. And we made a bold statement right up front at that August session, said we were going to become an employer of choice, and we're just going to behave that way. And so that was the vision. That's really where we wanted to take things. But you had to paint a picture of what the future looks like. And you do that when you do vision. Next slide, please. So how we did it, as the CEO of Johnson Health Center, my focus was on transforming the culture. So it started with me. And we looked at our aspirations versus the crises. So where did we want to go? Yes, we knew we had a crisis, but we only wanted to look at the crises.
Gary's came off mute here.
All right, now, okay, I'm hands are off the computer. I'm not touching the thing here. So hopefully you can hear me again. We created an 18-month plan that helped us stay focused and not change course when confronted with existing cultural challenges. And we were. I mean, you go through that. Anytime you go through any change is difficult, because we're not wired for change. We're wired to learn how to change, but just to change in general, there were a lot of things that were taking place. So back to the first bullet, we did focus on our aspirations and looked over our shoulders just as a point of reference. So we had to demonstrate a positive urgency. We had to inspire people to join us on this journey. And then we looked at our unfulfilled potential. That should say unfulfilled potential, because we've had a lot of that in our organization that nobody had tapped into. We took ownership in the culture we wanted. We modeled the way for leaders and the staff to see. And we put an intentional focus on developing leaders and looking at those high potentials that were going to help with this transformation. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just my executive team. It was a host of people that were going to help us make this happen. And then we created a team-oriented approach on the way to creating a culture of operational excellence and plus the staff and patient experience. So we invited a lot of people into those discussions and conversations. But the foundation of it all was our values, our core values. We have 5 core values, and we made our core values foundational to everything we did. They're embedded in all we do. We started it back in 2014, and everything we do is tied to those 5 core values. They're the first slide of every presentation that you see coming from a Johnson Health Center employee. and they are the first. They're written in every job description, every performance review. Hiring decisions are made. Decisions to move folks along to a happier place are made, all using the Johnson Health Center core values. And then the one mission is improving access to healthcare for all, because that's what we're here to do. Next slide, please. So a few results of that, just so that everyone would know, is really around what we've been able to accomplish since 2014. I just want to share this with you. We'll touch on it briefly, but we've really doubled our access to care since that time. We have mobile units, footprint expansions, and we did all of the expanded. Now we have had some grant dollars on the mobile units, but minus the mobile units, everything that we've done has been from organic growth. And we stepped up into the community because the community, we weren't meeting a need. And we have since that time established a degree of credibility to where we are the sought after partner for a host of things now, a host of initiatives to lead different things at the community level. And we're much closer with our hospital system now. We're closer with other partners in the area. Our revenues have really kind of gone from, I know when I joined the health center, we were about a $6 million health center in 2011, but we are projected close to 30 million for 2023. And that's, again, there's a lot of centers that are much bigger than us, but it's one of those things when you look at what we've been able to accomplish over those times, it really is it's just something that I'm very proud of, and I'm proud of our folks that have made this happen. Our turnover does remain lower than the national average. I think last year I saw the national average was 39.6% for healthcare, and ours is hovering around the 25% mark. That's as high as it's ever been. But at the same time, we were trying to work very hard to keep those numbers down. We are trending lower this year, but again, the work is so much harder now. And I want to reiterate that for those who are on this call who serve in a leadership position, the work is harder right now. It's a commitment that we really. It's one of those commitments. I say it's almost a 24/7 commitment. Doesn't mean you work 24/7, but it means you commit to being that leader 24/7. We now formalize leadership and training programs all over the place. We have multiple teams and committees that drive these successes. As I said, we couldn't do this on our own. And our quality program has noted 80% improved outcomes since 2015, and we have that 97% patient satisfaction rate, which was deemed a HRSA best practice back at our last site visit. And it was one of those things we do this thing with this iPads, and we were collecting over 30,000 surveys a year to determine how the patients felt about the services that they were getting. Next slide, please. So keys to employer choice success, we lived out the core values. And I'll emphasize the core values. And I'll talk about core values a lot because a lot of places, and again, the majority, they talk about having their values. And I'm not, again, some may do it better than others. But I think the real litmus test on your core values is, do your folks talk about them in the workplace? And can they reference them? I get emails. I got one a week ago about somebody nominating someone for a core value award at the end of the year, which doesn't even come up until December. And we usually seek these nominations around the November timeframe. They're already coming in. So these folks talk about the values, and that is really what we talk about, living these values. It happens over time. That's where the transformation work comes in. We had an intense focus on inclusion and organizational culture, and it started with helping them understand why and giving meaning to their work. So in the old days, I think if we made a decision or someone made a decision, that was it. And there was no explanation that went deeper into helping to know why a decision was made. We worked very hard at that, very hard at communicating the why behind every decision, so we could bring people closer together. And we listened, and it started at the top. It starts with me. I have to be the one that does the listening first, and then we drive that down with a coaching mentality and a streamlined evaluation process. We shortened out annual review process and leaned into a formalized coaching process, formal/informal, because it is about the conversation with the people that work with you. We put the right people in place, and there were some that didn't necessarily want to come along for the journey, and those folks left. And so and that's okay. That happens when you go through a transformation. You can expect to move some folks along, or they'll move along on their own. That's just the way it is, and it's okay because it's not for everybody. We led with impact by building and nurturing these relationships and raising these leaders at all levels. We're passionate about what we're doing. I'm very passionate about this work. It is so, I'm reading here. Yes, so formalized manager training, it is ongoing. participation is required. We have a Leadership Academy, which I will talk about in one of the next slides, but we have 2 programs we participate in. There's one, we participate in a community program called Leadership Lynchburg, which we are so involved in that now. Started back in 2015, when we started nominating our leadership to go into these programs. It's a unique event that people from all over the community get. You put in the application, if you get accepted, you're in. We had no one ever go through that, and we've had consistently 1 to 2 graduates each year from that. We actually put the first physician through that, who now serves on their board. So it is the leadership piece, and we did bring one in-house that we created coming out of COVID. We actually started it going into COVID, and we created a 19-course academy. April Lewis is on faculty for our Leadership Academy. And so we actually have a couple of folks who are getting close to graduation for that, being the first graduates. So 13 core courses, 6 elective courses. And really it is about driving innovation and core values and a data-driven approach, because everything we do, if you can't provide some data to back that up and support it, then you'll be challenged in questions. So a lot of it was around our business intelligence arm. One of the things we did was we split up IT. We had IT focus on the systems and the hardware and the software, and we created a business intelligence group to focus on the analytics, the data, and all of those types of things that could help us explain our story better. If you're a provider, you want to know if the data that you're seeing is accurate. And that was one of the things that I came from a for-profit world back in 2011, and we were so big on data. It was a large, it was Bayer Corporation, so a large pharmaceutical and chemical company that we depended on data a ton. So we brought that into our health center world and really kind of focused on that to build trust at all levels. Next slide, please. So since COVID and what we do now, we still work on the core values that will never go away. We established a vision at the onset of COVID. So at the very first call, when we brought people together, we said we will not lose any employees. And that was before the funding came out. We said we're going to work to keep all of our employees here. And we were successful in doing that. Yes, we did. I see the question, did we develop our leadership program? We did that ourselves. And the reason we did it is I do a lot of consulting as well. So I do a lot of work with the leadership development programs and do a lot of the teaching. So we looked at everything that made sense for our health center, tied it into our values and what people were asking for and seeking. And it's really, it's conference level coursework that's right inside our health center. It's not accredited, but it does offer people the ability to get educated that they would not necessarily get because they can't afford to, if they're front desk people. And we open it to everybody. We initially did it just for leadership, but then we opened it to everybody coming out of COVID because people really express a desire to develop themselves. And it is amazing what you see when you see a mixture of staff and leaders in a room together. And we do breakouts with them. And so they are sharing each other's ideas. So those are all important things. We increased visibility with these weekly town halls, and they're still going on today. I started the COVID town hall virtually, and I was amazed at the employees that would join this thing. And then it was so successful, now we do it every other week, and we transitioned that into just a town hall. So we went from COVID updates to town halls. And we do get probably a half to 2/3 of our staff on every single call we have. And we share a lot of information. I do employee spotlights. If I don't have any updates for people, I'll interview one of our staff members that, and a lot of them say, no, please don't bring me on and talk to me. But others say, yeah, I'd love to do that. And it gives people exposure to staff members they never knew. So that has been a lot of fun. There's the Leadership Academy I talked about. We reorganized to provide more operational clinical support. So we didn't have that, that really operational clinical leaders in place. They were clinical, but we created some positions that helped us with some pediatric and family medicine leadership at that, really at the ground level. And we formalized mid-level leadership, created associate directors. I meet with them quarterly. I want to know what they're thinking, and I challenge them to do their own critical thinking. And the takeaway from that was to get these 15 associate directors working closer together so they could solve a lot of problems. And that was the goal there, is developing them, because I look at them as the next level up. So where do they want to go next? And whether it's with us or somebody else, I want them to come out taking something away that is of value to them, because if we're providing them value, we get value back. We centered our 2021-2024 strategy on practice transformation. So our strategic plan was about transforming our practice. and bringing the joy back to the work that we do. That's everybody does. And that was our vision for the plan. That vision will carry on into the next strategic plan because we're not quite there. But our goal is to make the clinical world easier for our clinical team. So all of data that is entered, can we do it better? Is there highly advanced dictation software? And there is, and it's expensive, but we are going down the path of that right now. And the 4 providers that we're piloting with absolutely love it. So we're going to work to make sure that we can continue that process, and then look at other ways to just to try to take some of the really routine, mundane work out of the day-to-day jobs. We're looking at we're exploring different scheduling methodologies, and we're inviting their input in. We just had a roundtable 2 weeks ago with our clinical leaders to talk about what are their ideas to help with burnout. Give us some thoughts around that, and we provide them tools so they can run their own groups. And that's an area where we've had to work really hard, is to invite them into a conversation that empowers them to make decisions at their level. Sometimes I don't think they think that, and I think that's a challenge for us as leaders and as you as coaches out there is coaching them to do critical thinking and giving them the tools to make those decisions, because that's part of bringing the meaning to the work. I hold my executive team accountable for office hours at our larger sites, and we do listening sessions, and we do innovation roundtables. We do a series of innovation roundtables all year long. And so can I share core values? Yes. Respect, teamwork, innovation, excellence, and integrity. So somebody just asked that, and that's off the cuff. I don't have my badge on, but I should have listed those in there. When I do expect my executives to be an extension of me and to get out there and make certain that our folks can see them. And that's worked really well too, because I really want people to know that we're not sitting in an ivory tower somewhere and we don't know what's happening in the field. And that's just, again, there's a lot of work that is involved with that, and it's out of comfort zone for some people, but it's part of finding your own comfort and being able to do that. And we do a heavy focus on staff well-being programs and addressing mental health concerns. Next slide, please. So what does a coaching culture look like? And we're going to wind it down, but my good friend and colleague Tammy Green, who was a CEO in Anchorage, Alaska, now does her own consulting, and her and I do a lot of collaborating and back and forth, trying to help each other. Iron sharpens iron, and April Lewis is the same way. But her definition of a coaching culture is a culture of coaching which brings forth the wisdom and maximizes the contribution of all your people, all your team. I see Tammy. Yes, she is amazing there. She's our old CEO. Yes, so she's great. I really like working with her. But coaching is about shifting leadership mindsets from control, command, or the expert knower to a space of invitation for greater buy-in. As you've heard me talk about this the whole time. It's about coaching is no more than just inviting people into a discussion, getting buy-in, and driving engagement. And when you have this in place, your employees feel engaged with their leaders, and they feel safe to ask questions and challenge the status quo, or admit when they don't know an answer. I mean, this is big, because you want them to be able to come to you if they don't know something. So it's all part of what a coaching culture is intended to drive. And at its best, it's the act of investing in your team members in ways that validate them and invite them to live up to their fullest potential for their own growth, as well as the synergistic contribution to a shared mission and vision. I tell people that if I still go to the orientation sometimes, but they do a video of me, I tell our new people, we harbor no illusion of keeping you here forever. But what we do expect and would like to have is 100% of you give us your 100%. We will give you the 100%, because we want you if you decide to leave, we want you to be a walking ambassador for us on the street. Be our extension of our recruitment arm. We want it to be a great experience both ways. So that's part of the coaching piece, and it goes across the entire organization. Next slide, please. All right, making it happen. So running out of time here, looking at everything. Okay, we got about 5 minutes, I think. So I wasn't good about leaving a lot of time at the end, but I'm trying to. I'm going to move. I have the impact leadership model. It's on my impact leadership, our impact lead website, and the top two is really what's important here. They're all important, because you have to have trust at the very bottom to make all this stuff work. But the ability to influence, you have to have a compelling vision that delivers on the why and the purpose. And not everybody has to be an I on the DISC scale. I mean, this is how you influence people or how you inspire people. Do it in your own way. So it's really about driving influence, and you don't have to be in a leadership position to do that, but it's helping people get what they want, what they need, and help understand what their why and purpose is. The other one is make it personal. And this is about emotionally intelligent leaders. And one of the things that I want to make sure I didn't leave any of this out, but to be an emotionally intelligent leader is about building relationships and about understanding your own knowledge, your self-knowledge, your self-control, how empathetic are you, and then your social skills. And this can be taught. And then having the motivation to be able to improve yourself in all those categories. But that's really around what it takes to, when you think about building these relationships, it is about how you position yourself as a leader to invite people into a conversation that helps deliver on a mission and a vision. And that is where the inspiration to influence comes in as well. And the rest of these are all things that, it is a much broader explanation on the website, but these are all things that tie into being able to drive a coaching culture. This is the model I dropped into the Johnson Health Center back in 2014 when we started our employer choice track. Next slide, please. So influence and making it personal. Takeaways: build rapport with team members and don't rely on annual performance review. You'll increase their engagement because you build trust with them, and ultimately you build some loyalty. It will help motivate your people as well. They will be far more receptive and even seek your feedback, especially when they may be struggling with something. And the other piece, it costs far less in bonuses that you may not have to give, especially if you don't have a direct authority. The ability to influence by getting buy-in through authentic engagement is priceless. Priceless. I mean, this is when you work across your departments. Like, think about IT. I depend on IT so much, but I engage with IT. Before I was ever in a leadership position, I always made sure that I built a relationship with our folks in IT because I always needed something, and they were always willing to help me along, and we just helped each other. We were able to pick each other up at any given time and support one another. And you and your team will enjoy the work more. If you're not the top person in charge, remember, you're the mini CEO of your own world. So you control this. It's controlling the destiny in your own place. You can improve your own and the works group, whether others come along or not. Just remember that, because not everyone's bought into this type of culture, and things are shifting. So we might have to be the people who drive a lot of this, but it is about what you do with what you have. Next slide, please. This is making it happen. Conduct your regular one-on-one meetings with each person on your team and initially find out a little more on what motivates them. Don't wait for the formal meetings to check in with them. I got a brand new executive on my team, and I want to make sure that that individual isn't struggling or having an issue. So I find time to, whether it's at the coffee pot, whether it's we were at an event, we were at the leadership event last week, and I just asked how things going. And sometimes people aren't willing to share that information with you because they want you to know that they're doing okay, or want you to believe they're doing okay. But if they're not doing okay, you just got to ask them. So you just ask, how are you doing? Get to know them a little bit beyond just the role that they're in. Always ask good questions and be curious and be present when this is done, because even when passing somebody, you walk by somebody, hey, how you doing today? And you walk on, that's okay. But I think have those opportunities where you're walking by somebody and ask them a question from a curiosity viewpoint. You don't have to get personal with them, but you got to show that you're interested in them. And write down the stuff that's important. So if they tell you something that you deem important about it, write it down, because that way you'll remember for the next time. Foster an inclusive environment and leverage diversity from all angles. Diversity is everything. It's diversity of thought, people, personalities. Leverage it from all angles, because you get a lot more input, and a lot more smarter people in decision making comes from those types of environments. Remember, coaching is nothing more than intentionality and purposely building relationships and helping others get what they need to be successful, and understanding the meaning in the work that they do. Next slide, please. This is the go-giver mentality. The world is full of uncertainty. When people know they can always count on you to deliver the same quality of experience no matter what, you become an oasis of stability within their personal sandstorm or change. When you can combine both excellence plus consistency, you truly create exceptional value. My good friend Bob Berg, John David Mann, they wrote The Go-Giver. I've become friends with Bob, the author there. And if any of you have read that book, that is a wonderful read. This is from Go-Giver Sell More. I would encourage you to take a look at that. We ran through that at our own health center. And just the principles and the laws of stratospheric success are moving. So I think that's it. let's see what the next slide. Yeah, there you go. There's me. There's my contact information. If you have any questions, I know I got through this and didn't leave us any time. Sorry, Gerard.
No, Gary, you did a great job answering questions along the way. So very much appreciate that. Let's see if we have any additional questions that we might share with you here. Well, certainly we encourage you, if you have additional questions or comments, please enter those in the chat. While we wait for those, Gary, first of all, thank you.
Thank you for having me here. This is great. You know I love this stuff.
We appreciate you sharing the insights with us and you know your open and honesty, openness and honesty in terms of some of the challenges that you face and learn along the way. You mentioned that you let's see, that you felt like you were in a crisis when you all were originally starting this work. How can an organization use the tips that you've shared or this culture work to be able to avert a crisis when it comes to their employees?
Well, I think if you establish an environment of open communications, we have a culture committee too. We launched our DEI program, back before any of the, back before you became trendy. I hate to say that, but back before the social unrest of 2020, when everything went in combination with COVID, we had already launched our DEI program because we wanted to be so inclusive. We wanted to cast a broader net, making sure we weren't missing anything, and just wanted to create a place where everybody felt safe and welcome. I think that's what I would just suggest is look at the things around your health center and look at things in your own world. And are you having real, true conversations with people? And are you, and if you hear something is going on, don't just chalk it up and say, well, we've dealt with this before, it'll pass. No, really, I would say that now more than ever, you have to lean in on some of these things, and you have to give a little more ear to, concerns of people, because people are in a much different state now than they were 3, 4, 5 years ago. And I think that, and we're seeing a movement on that too. So it's expected that we lean in. And I think that can help you avert crisis. Once you're in a crisis, it's okay. The thing about a crisis is, just like the pandemic, we dealt with it. We knew it was in front of us. We didn't know how it was going to end, and it went a lot longer than any of us expected. But the fact is, we embraced it. We said, okay, we have a challenge. Let's just make sure we use this challenge and build opportunities out of it. So that's the other piece is you have to walk around with positive energy, because if you walk around negative and people view you as negative or view you as not being able to really do anything other than maybe be the victim in the process, you're not going to have the kind of success to building the kind of culture that you would like, and it would take you a lot longer. So that would be my advice there.
Thank you, Gary. Another question is, how do you gain executive buy-in on the necessity of focusing on the employees and putting these practices in place?
That's a question that's tough to answer, because as I have learned in my consulting world, that it's a mix of opinions around that, and I think ultimately what happens is, this is just me. This is just me with Johnson Health Center and the executives that I have. We work hard to drive this type of culture because it's important to us. And our work is easier when we have a culture of engagement and we're all bought into it. If you don't have that, I would just talk about the importance of it. And if you can't get that executive buy-in and you're functioning in a department level, get it in your own department. So function, create that world in the world in which you sit, and others can look and see into what's happening there. And then again, you become, a stabilizing force for that.
A related question is, how do you help managers make time for learning and developing themselves on a continuous basis?
So we block the time. We've committed to it. It's funny, I had a dental hygienist, and hygienists are hard to come by. So, and we have a lot of patients that are waiting to get in to be seen, but she really wanted to focus on her leadership. She's somebody who we gave lead opportunities to, and that's again part of our culture. And she kept taking these leadership academy classes, and I just told and committed to our dental team. I said, well, and our CFO, I said, we committed to this as a broader vision. So we are not, if we can't get, if it's an impact on patient access, okay, we'll give her a shot another time. But we said yes to all of those courses for her, and you have to just commit to doing it.
Great. Well, we'll take one more question here, Gary. What are the committees you currently have in place that are feeding your coaching culture?
So we have a culture committee, which is huge. That's derived out of our DE&I work. And we go every January, well, I should say every November, we have 12 new people join that committee. When I first launched it, I had to beg people to get on that committee. I had to select them and get on the committee. Now we have people signing up and we have to say, you got to wait till next time. But we have that culture committee, which they go through all sorts of neat things for us, and they help us keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening. That is really one of the more impactful committees. They actually met this morning and talked about, what makes you feel valued in the workplace. And so we have those open, safe conversations. We have our quality improvement committee. We call it continuous quality improvement, which we invite all sorts of participants into because we want them to understand why the value piece is so important. We just launched a value incentive program that's tied to value-based dollars. And now our clinicians really have interest in some of this stuff. So they join these committees as well. We also have innovation roundtable. We have a patient safety committee. We're getting ready to launch a government relations committee. So it's really about giving people opportunities to develop, where they may not be in leadership positions, but they have the ability to develop at certain other places within our health center. And just, again, prepare them for work with us and work wherever they go. And I'm sure I got a bunch more that I can't think of right now.
Well, we appreciate you sharing those with us, Gary. Thank you again so much for helping us to reflect upon how to become a high trust organization that is really focused on their culture and a culture of employee well-being. Very much appreciate that,
Well,
Gary.
I'm honored to be here, and I really appreciate inviting me into this and being part of such a great workshop and summit. It's humbling, and I'm thankful for it. And I appreciate all the people here with their questions and chats. I wish I could have got to every single one of them.
Yes, and we ask you to keep those questions coming. Again, we'll share those out so Gary can consider them in future engagements that he has. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a great rest of the day.
You too, Gary.
Thank you so much.